Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new edition of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Kevin Quigley. Kevin, Penn State made a statement Saturday night under the lights at Beaver Stadium. West Shore home field at Beaver Stadium. Let me get that correct. And it was what we expected Penn State to play like at the beginning of the year. When they came into the season, the number 2 team in the country. And that's what we expected every game for them. Now, it only took 11 games out of the season for that to finally happen, but they put on a clinic against a Nebraska team that was 7-3. Probably their record's inflated based on their opponents this year, no disrespect. But when your 3 losses came to Michigan, USC, and Minnesota, 2 of the 3 teams that had a pulse on your schedule, then that's kind of where you're at. But they came out, slammed the ball down their throat, ran the ball down their throat early and often. Ethan Grunkemeyer was efficient. He was 11 of 12 for 181 yards and a touchdown. This was the Penn State offense and defense that people expected coming into the season, and it was a damn good time for it to happen.
It certainly was. Obviously, Penn State's most complete, dominant game of the season. Penn State opened that spread. Vegas didn't even have a being this dominant. The game opened at 9.5. Betting brought the line down to 7.5 in Penn State's favor. And I believe I even said on the podcast Thursday night, Friday morning, whenever it came out, that 7.5 kind of feels like a weird spread. Like TJ Lateef looked strong against UCLA. Granted, it's UCLA, but it was a road game. Nebraska's shown promises in the run game. Penn State's had trouble stopping the run game at times this year. All of these things, it did not look like, Penn State, if they won the game by a touchdown, 10 points, like, job well done. Go get it done against Rutgers the next week. But they were up 23-3 at halftime, 30-3 after the first drive of the second half, and ended up winning the game by 27 points. And of all of the outcomes that you and I could have possibly dreamed of, a 27-point domination is just was nowhere near in the cards. And, it speaks volumes to the galvanization that's occurred since James Franklin was fired.
And that's right. Like, the thing is, like, this was a dominant performance. We didn't even see this in non-conference play. There was not a performance that was like, oh, well, this is dominant. It was just kind of there. It was just, It was just blah, if you will. But over the last, few weeks since James Franklin was fired, this is a return to Penn State football. This team has an identity. This team knows who they are and what they are. Saturday night, they came out and showed it. They play tough, blue-collar football, smash-mouth football defensively. They've simplified things on both sides of the football. And for a defensive backs coach to come in and lay down the law with your coordinators and say, hey, this is how we're going to do things moving forward, it's an incredible sight. And you have to wonder, at what point did Franklin lose his staff and his players when he was head coach of the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, most definitely, because either that or James Franklin was just that convinced that the way that he was running things was what was going to make Penn State successful, despite 9 out of 11 years or 10 out of 12 years that being strictly proven wrong. And then perhaps we just got to acknowledge it. It was senior night. Katron Allen gets the Penn State all-time rushing record in 4 years. And then Nick Singleton tied Saquon Barkley for all-time touchdown record. Hopefully he can get one more next week and get that record. And those are 2 guys came in, same recruiting class, split carries all the way around, had a really dominant freshman year, took a step back 2 years ago. Last year, I think they both ran for 1,000 yards. And then this year, they're both just setting their own records. So, and like earlier this season, I don't think we saw Katron Allen running 160 yards on 25 carries. Like that wasn't in it. Offensive line has looked remarkably better. Sure, you can say the Nebraska defensive line, probably not the level of Ohio State's. The Michigan State defensive line, probably not the level of Indiana. But they've made decisions that have, in his short tenure, have changed the way that this team works. Luke Reynolds was getting a bulk of the snaps at tight end, Luke Reynolds was not having a great year run blocking. Probably something he needs to work on in the offseason. And what did they do? Guess who got the most snaps for a tight end last night? Andrew Rappelier. He hasn't seen the field pretty much his entire Penn State career. He's been hurt for a lot of that. He's been tucked behind Tyler Warren and Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds, quite frankly. And it's like, he's a redshirt sophomore, so this is his third year on the roster. Obviously, he does have the redshirt in, so he's not playing more than 4 games. But like, they made a decision. Luke, as great as you are as a talent, we need somebody that can help in the run game. And Andrew Rappelier has been helping in the run game. And then he pays off and he gets his first career touchdowns at Nittany Lions. So a lot of personnel changes have been made, and just it's been for the better. It's galvanized the team because finally you're not looking at like, I don't care what class you are, like whoever is going to perform the best this week in practice, this week in the walkthroughs, whatever, and whoever's going to give us the best chance to win on Saturday, that's who's playing on Saturday night. And it seems like that's the way the roster is being managed right now, and that only comes from the top.
This has been a very weird year. The last time that especially for me, but as a whole for Penn State, because obviously you have the firing, you have the loss to Oregon, and then UCLA, and then Northwestern, and then Franklin gets fired. The mood after the Northwestern game at Beaver Stadium was tense. It was eerie. It was just this tense atmosphere that was just, you knew something bad was going to happen, and that was the firing of Franklin. And lo and behold, and we talked about that at length. It was time. Well, it was time. Maybe it was even a game or two too late. Maybe he could have been fired sooner. I don't know. And obviously, there are some inner workings there with his relationship with Pat Kraft that soured real quick. But it's clear to me that these guys love Terry Smith. That is evident. But being on that field, this year I've kind of taken a step back from being down on the field. With 5 minutes left, media is allowed to be on the field at most places, and just on the field after the game and see different things, right? And last night I made sure to do it. I made sure to do it against Northwestern because I felt something was going to happen. Against Northwestern, I thought Drew Aller was going to lead a potential game-winning drive. Instead, it was Franklin not getting any acknowledgement from Pat Kraft, and then ultimately, paying the ultimate price. Last night, or I guess Saturday night, if you will, it was such a jubilant atmosphere after a win. Like, don't get me wrong, like Michigan State is Michigan State. They're not a good team. Nebraska is probably not as good as their 7-4 record now that they have that loss to Penn State. But a win is a win. They've now won their last 2. They've been in almost every game outside of that Ohio State game. And even then, that was a competitive game for 3 quarters. But it just seemed like just the pressure has been lifted. Like, you could cut the tension with a knife previously after games, regardless of whether they won or lost. But this game, it was just a loose atmosphere. Coaches were high-fiving, hugging, smiling, yelling, screaming, you name it. And yeah, it's a win against the Nebraska team. You're 1 win away from potentially being bowl eligible. But man, it's such a 180 from what it was like under James Franklin.
Yeah, I think the Northwestern game, like, the mood was like, oh, this is over. Like, not only is the season over, you've lost your third straight game at that point in time. Definitely felt like the tenure of Franklin was over, but we didn't know that. But like, everything was just awful. It was just, the mood in the stadium was about bad. Even in the mood in Oregon game, like, the crowd was energetic, but it wasn't exactly like fully positive. The crowd that came out last night, granted, heavily hindered by Thanksgiving travel. Penn State obviously has the week-long Thanksgiving break when the season is pretty much over at this point in time. Students didn't stick around. They opted for an extra day at home. I can understand that. Don't necessarily agree with it, but I mean, when I was a student, I didn't go to the game after Thanksgiving typically. If it was before Thanksgiving home game, I would go. If it was after Thanksgiving, typically I didn't. But so I can understand that from their perspective. But it was positive. And somebody on Twitter talked about, like, this is Terry Smith's like Rudy moment, like chanting his name, and like the stadium, like, in the fan base, it kind of feels together. Like, Franklin was such a polarizing figure. Obviously, the results were polarizing. When it was good, when it was good. When it was bad, the world was crashing down.
There wasn't ever a cheer for Franklin.
No.
He had multiple fire Franklin chants beginning back in 2016. You know, I mean, I'll never forget the Minnesota game. He booed off the field at halftime. You know, there have been multiple instances of fire Franklin, fire Franklin, fire Franklin, but never once did anybody yell James, James, James. Like, this dude wasn't liked. Like, he wasn't universally liked, and he might have been respected to an extent. And listen, I'm not taking away from the fact that he did some good things at Penn State. He was 37-11 in his last 48 games at Penn State. That is phenomenal. He got them to the playoff semifinal last year. Their identity was Tyler Warren. This year, with lofty expectations, they had no identity. I don't know if that was self-inflicted because of ego, but that tension and that fear of not living up to those expectations was a factor. But now, for the first time, you know, this is a buzzword that Franklin has used literally everywhere, alignment. Now, Penn State fans, Penn State players, Penn State letter winners, media, Terry Smith are all aligned for Terry Smith.
And
that's something that's never happened. You know, James Franklin has mentioned alignment for 15 years, getting back to, I would imagine, Vanderbilt. And that was one of the things he said time and time again at Virginia Tech in his press conference earlier last week. Alignment. This is the first time they have come together in alignment. But now it's what's Pat Kraft's going to do?
Yeah, and not only that, like, I feel like the Penn State offense especially has not looked that dominant in a very, very long time. Like, they open the game, they have the fourth down stop against Nebraska. They get the ball on the 2-yard line, march right down the field, 98 yards, get a touchdown. The very next drive, I think it starts at the 10, and they go, I mean, they almost had a chance to legitimately go 98-90 on back-to-back touchdown drives to end the game, to start the game. It ultimately didn't happen. Settled for a field goal, I do believe, is when they got that field goal. But like, just the team, everything is bought in. The alignment, like you mentioned, like the alignment in the locker room seems to be there. The alignment in the coaching staff is there. Pat Kraft is there. The fan base is galvanized. All the alumni are actually just coming out of the woodworks and saying, like, Terry Smith should probably be the guy. Like, all of this stuff, and it's great to be around. The energy is just wholly positive at this point.
There's energy again. There's positive energy. There was never truly a positive source of energy under Franklin. You know, and that's weird to say because they had a lot of success, but it was always the same old song and dance. I mean, the guy is a used car salesman. He's a very damn good used car salesman. Let's be real. But it was never positive. It was, when's the next shoe going to drop? When's the next loss that you expect is going to happen? Right? And yeah, listen, I see it on Twitter all the time. Well, you're mad at a guy that lost to Michigan and Iowa State. Listen, he didn't lose to Michigan until they started cheating. But the constant losing to the same team every year because they're so far in your head. And don't get me wrong, like, Urban Meyer and Ryan Day are very good. They're elite coaches. But at some point, like, the law of averages say you're at least going to win these games. And it's not like they didn't have chances. But it was just that deja vu sequence every time with Franklin. And now there's a positive energy. Terry Smith is leading the way. And that has now put the cards back on Pat Kraft's side of the table, because there's no way I think that he or anybody else thought this was going to happen. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we come back for the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Kevin, Penn State fired James Franklin a little over 40 days ago. I was not expecting it. I think it needed to happen, but here we are. Things have changed. At that time, Penn State was 3-3 with no group of 5 wins, or group of 4 wins. And lo and behold, now, you know, they're 5-6 going into one final game in East Piscataway, New Jersey. And it's a whole new team. It's the same players, but this is not the team that we saw play before. That is purely a testament to Terry Smith. We talked about that at length in the first segment. I don't think anybody expected this. They came out and they competed against Indiana, which was the first. Okay, they competed for a good chunk of time against Ohio State. I personally think Ohio State's going to win the national championship. They are the best team in the country for a reason, right? So there is that.
Had a legitimate shot to beat Iowa in Ethan's first start.
Yes.
On the road at night at Kinnick.
Yeah, and it's a far from easy trek to start that season. You're at Iowa, you got Ohio State at Ohio State, then you host Indiana. It's far. The first 3 games are not an easy thing. Now you started to get confidence and you got your swag back, and that's huge. These guys are willing to play for Terry Smith. They play hard for Terry Smith. They've gone to bat for Terry Smith. Nobody ever went to bat for James Franklin. Nobody ever went to say, hey, James Franklin, there's rumors out here where he's our coach, like he's our guy. Nope. Nobody ever has done that. And there's a lot of success, and James Franklin was a great recruiter, is a great recruiter. What we're seeing now is the 17 decommitments, and I think this is it's alarming because there's so many. But let's be real. Penn State does not pay good NIL money to incoming recruits. They just don't. But when you have a recruiter such as, Terry Smith or even James Franklin, you're going to, you know what? Hey, here, we're going to make you a promise. This is what you're going to get when you're going to get it, yada, yada, yada. When James Franklin's gone, well, yeah, it's easy to go chase that bag. And I think that's what we've seen. Is a lot of these guys didn't go to places that were as good as or better than Penn State as a program. I don't think that, Kevin Brown, offensive lineman for WVU, so no disrespect to WVU, but I don't think WVU is in the same stratosphere as Penn State right now. Even with the turmoil at coach. So there's that aspect of it. But Pat Kraft has a decision on his hands. I think he's already made his decision. I think they already have a hire. They just can't announce it yet because every coach that's worth a damn is still coaching, right? Ole Miss is going through a rash of issues because Lane Kiffin hasn't signed an extension. Kirk Cignetti got that extension quick. Matt Rule got that extension quick. Will Nebraska regret that? More will be found about that later on. But those guys have all gotten extensions. Guys like Kalen DeBoer, he hasn't got an extension yet. Guys like Lane Kiffin hasn't gotten an extension yet. I'm not saying that those guys are all going to be tied to the Penn State job. I think, Brent Key got an extension as well at Georgia Tech. So, those guys are the leverage is great. I think Penn State should honestly get a cut of it because of what's going on. Same deal with, what's going on in Florida. And, FSU re-upped with Norvell. And I think that's crazy because I don't think that he's worth a damn since they figured out that Jordan Travis got hurt and they were bounced from the playoff. So, there's just so much there. It's a silly season. It's a crazy carousel. But now Pat Kraft has a decision to make. Terry Smith has this team balling. And again, I understand that it's Michigan State. I understand that it is Nebraska. That's not the Indianas, the Ohio States, the Michigans of the world. But damn, if they're not playing hard for him and playing good football, we are seeing development week by week from Ethan Grunkelmeyer. We're seeing development again from Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, who I thought had plateaued at the beginning of the season. And this quote, I'm going to pull this quote up from last night, and then I'll let you get into what you want to say. Because this is such a poignant quote from Terry Smith, who is refreshingly genuine. I do want to say that about Terry Smith. Terry Smith is as real as it gets. That dude there isn't an ounce of fake in his body. He is genuine. He is sincere. And that is so refreshing to see when you're talking with the media and you're interacting after a game. But this is what he said during his press conference yesterday. Another thing that's happening since I've taken over is my level of accountability to our team. Whether it's coaches, players, staff, everyone's accountable and no one can fall short. And I call it out. And I call it out in our team meetings, our staff meetings, in front of everyone. And no one wants to be called out. And I make it a point to call out our best players because they have to be accountable. They have to give this team more. And that's what you're witnessing these last few weeks. Our best players are giving us more. That is the difference in winning now and why we weren't winning earlier.
I mean,
Damn.
Tough love is good love, right? Like there are definitely people in the world that, you know, you need to caress them and hold them and hug them and say, "Oh, it's okay, little Johnny, you can get it next time." And that's the Mike Tomlin effect. That's the James Franklin effect. But sometimes, especially in the game of football, or I'm an engineer, like I need to know whether I'm right or wrong. Do I like being called out? Absolutely not. But I need to know that I'm doing things right and I'm doing things wrong. If you call me out for I've made a mistake and you call me out on it, of course, I'm going to feel like dog shit about it, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm not going to make that mistake again, right? And I feel like in football and engineering are very, very similar. You're either right or you're wrong. There's some gray areas in there one time, but at the end of the day, 2 + 2 still equals 4. It's never going to equal 3 and it's never going to equal 5. And if I put 3 or 5 on that paper, somebody's going to come talking to me. And if you get 3 yards in football on a 4th down and 4, guess what? It's the other team's ball. There are clear differences of what's right and what's wrong. And I think that's what you see with Terry Smith. The problem is the timing of the firing. I think there is an ultimate paradox going on inside the program that are we talking right now where Penn State beats Nebraska if James Franklin's still the head coach? I don't know. Are we talking that Penn State beat Nebraska 37-10 and it was a 7:00 NBC game because of the way that Penn State has seemingly played since his firing? Absolutely not. Like, this is probably a 1-possession game. Penn State may have needed a game-winning drive or a last-second stop to even get out of this game with a win. So, like, the team is galvanized. It's given Terry Smith a legitimate shot at head coach. It has emerged Terry Smith as one of the top coaching candidates for this job. The problem is pretty much everyone else that they've wanted in this job search, because this has been so prominent in the national media. We probably should talk about the national media. Maybe that's our parting shot tonight.
Ugh.
We might want to get that out of the way now. Let's just do it. The paradox of the national media is James Franklin can't win the big one. He's never going to get Penn State over the hump. All of this stuff. And then he gets fired and it's like, oh, they did him wrong. Like, look how great of a coach he is and all this other stuff. Like, they're just talking out of both sides of their mouth. That's been pissing me off. But the prominence of the Penn State fire, of James Franklin firing, the prominence of Penn State football, the prominence of where they've been over the last 3 years, the prominence where they were last year, the prominence where they were at number 2 in the preseason rankings, all of this stuff made that really high profile, which makes the coaching search really high profile. That's why the Signetti extension happens. That's why the Rule extension happens. Jeff Brom, Mike Elko, all of these potential candidates, probably Elko was probably the most legitimate, despite Texas A&M just going off. I don't think Rule really had any credence. It was just too clear of a connection there. But at this point in time, if all of your main guys, the big targets, are getting gobbled up, the other side of that paradox is that Terry Smith has had 5 weeks, 6 weeks, because there was a bye week, to get this thing together and to really galvanize this team and really show that, if you give him a chance, he can do it. Now, what does that look like on the recruiting trail? What does that look like next year? They really need to make sure that they have a head coach in place by the time the transfer portal opens, because they pretty much do not have a freshman class.
And it opens up as soon as they hire a coach. So, it's such a conundrum, because you want to hire, like, you fire James Franklin, and I think you're expected to make a splash hire. So it's really weird to hire from within. Terry Smith has the benefit of 2 things. One, he's a Penn State guy, man. And I think that's the other thing too. Penn State is I don't want to put this lightly, because I don't want to construe that they're just this disloyal group, but they are fiercely loyal. This is a fan base and program that has been traumatized by the wrongdoings of a singular person. The scapegoat in that was their leader, the person that was responsible for 409 wins. So this, and not a single coach has been able to tie back to that. Terry Smith was that bridge from Success with Honor and Joe Paterno to 2.0 Success with Honor and James Franklin. And James Franklin did an honorable job doing that. It's not like he's not like Kirby Smart in Georgia, where those guys are running red lights every night and doing God knows what in their cars. And Terry Smith is that bridge. Terry Smith is a letterman. He is a Penn Stater through and through. There is significant value in that. Terry Smith deserves and should and has to have a job in this next staff. Has to. Franklin surrounded himself with Penn State guys on the staff that played for him, which was good. You know, obviously you have to have that Penn State flavor. But I just don't know what Pat Kraft is going to do, because at the beginning, I thought Terry Smith is a guy that's a glue guy. He's honestly, and he is 100% a glue guy, because he's picked up every broken piece of this team, from the offensive line to the offensive coordinator to the quarterback to the running backs to the receivers, and put them all back together again. And he's done so in a short amount of time, and really by fire, because let's be real, he's the head coach. He was a head coach at I'm drawing a blank. Gateway. That's it. And so there's familiarity there. Obviously, it's a different thing. But his big thing Saturday night, I'm a leader of men. And we are seeing that wholeheartedly. And you don't see that in college football. You don't see that realness. You don't see that passion, that just sheer genuine. And that's Terry Smith. Pat Kraft has a tough decision to make, because I don't think that this was ever going to be a legitimate option, but he has forced his hand, because this team has not given up. This team has stayed in every game that they've played for him, and they have been one play or two plays away from beating every team other than Ohio State.
Yeah, I think the fear now is that if he's not made head coach, is Penn State able to retain him? He's not a guy that's motivated by money. Like he is, I feel like he's far too, he cares about football. He cares about his life, and he's genuine and true to himself, that like, you're not going to be able to say, we'll double your salary of what James Franklin's going to give you, and he's going to stay. He's going to be loyal to either Penn State or James Franklin. I think he's loyal to Penn State if he's made head coach. If he's made associate head coach, GM, and he's given a $2 million, $3 million a year contract, does that keep him? I don't know. But I mean, we just have to look around at the other names floating around the country that, you know, still are potentially available. I think where there's smoke, there's fire on Kalen DeBoer. Like, talk about a guy who's having impossible shoes to fill. It's Kalen DeBoer. He's been successful this year at Alabama. The loss at Florida State to open the season is what it is. It's Ty Simpson's first start as quarterback. They lose by 14. You know, weird vibes around that game, but they've seemingly righted the ship after that. And you know, is Kalen DeBoer a legitimate option? Is Lane Kiffin now a legitimate option? Because, you know, the travels of what we believe to be Jimmy Sexton is that there was a wheels up jet flying from Tuscaloosa to Gainesville to Auburn to Oxford, Mississippi to Clemson, and then direct from Oxford, Mississippi to State College. Gainesville, that's a Jimmy Sexton client. Or no, Mike Norvell at Florida State is, but Gainesville's rumored to be a landing spot for Lane Kiffin, who's a Jimmy Sexton employee or representative. Client. That's the word. Kalen DeBoer is represented by Jimmy Sexton, but Clemson, Dabo Swinney's not represented by Jimmy Sexton.
The apples that are about to fall from this Ole Miss decision and Lane Kiffin's decision, they forced his hand. They needed it. They will know by Saturday if they don't already know. The nature of the business is it's very weird. You know, we talked about this before. And this is, you know, we're talking about coaching searches and Terry Smith after a night where Penn State played their best football of the year.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Terry Smith because everybody's talking about Terry Smith. The fans, the players, the lettermen, everybody like that. But around the country, it's a different beast. You know, Lane Kiffin, you know, you see the 30 for 30 on him, and you see or the E60 or whatever it was, and you see how much he has grown and changed from that young brash guy that took the Raiders job that he's probably a little too green for. his growth under Nick Saban and then going to FIU or FAU, I should say. And then, what he's done at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, has not historically been a great college football program. They've had some solid teams. The Mannings have gone through there, and say what you will about them, but that's good and all. But Lane Kiffin has returned them to relevance. He's had one big win, and that ironically was against Penn State and in the Peach Bowl. But he's a guy that's also real, right? And I think there's value in that. But we're seeing the timeline of everything. Everybody is still playing that matters and that you want. It's not like you're going to go out and get Pat Narduzzi. I mean, yeah, Pitt's still playing, but it's just one of those deals. But a decision has to be made because you've got recruiting season coming up. You got National Signing Day coming up in December because the NCAA is purely incompetent, and then you've got all kinds of different things coming up with the college football playoff and bowl games and things of that nature. And colleges that are on semester schedules, you got the end of semesters coming up and the beginning of semesters. So getting them accepted to your school and your university before or during the portal season is just a wild thing to navigate. But we're going to find a lot. I think it's going to get a lot clearer. There are two things that I think are going to ultimately change the course of how this all unfolds, and that's what Kalen DeBoer does at Alabama. Does he leave? Does he stay? And the same thing with Lane Kiffin, because if DeBoer leaves, Kiffin goes to Bama, and then LSU and Florida are back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Lane Kiffin is going to be involved in the domino that falls. Lane Kiffin is either going to be the first domino that falls or the second domino that falls. But Lane Kiffin is involved whichever it goes, because if Lane Kiffin makes a decision, then UF or LSU or Penn State are back to the drawing board. Mostly it feels like LSU and UF. Does Lane Kiffin want to come to the Big Ten? I don't know. Penn State, I think, would definitely be an upgrade from Ole Miss job, but does he want to leave the South? Does he want to leave the SEC? Places that he's not. I mean, he's familiar with that territory. He's familiar with that conference. But if there's rumors that if Kalen DeBoer loses the Iron Bowl to Auburn, that he's out.
What an awful loss that would be.
And if he's out, yeah, you're right. You're spot on. There's no way Alabama, if Kalen DeBoer voluntarily leaves, there's no way Alabama's not immediately calling Jimmy Sexton and saying, what's the number? Right. Yeah. They don't even have to interview Lane Kiffin. There's just a contract on his desk for him to sign, there's a PDF on his iPad for him to sign to say, yep, here we go. Back to Tuscaloosa I come, because this is going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. I can't wait. It's going to be Thanksgiving.
Yeah. What are you thankful for? Right. And that's the other thing too, Kevin, you look at it a certain way. What about Dabo? If Alabama opens and Lane Kiffin has already made his decision, where's Dabo in all this? Dabo's an Alabama guy, and things aren't going well at Clemson, and they haven't gone well at Clemson.
I don't think Dabo's a legitimate candidate at Auburn at all.
No. Oh, God.
I don't know if he's considering Arkansas at all. I think he's got it good at Clemson. I think he's got a very long leash there, and I think there's probably going to be some candid conversations between the alumni base, the athletic department, and Dabo Swinney of, look, buddy, we need to get this thing figured out and fast. What's the NIL budget? Problem is Clemson is a very small alumni base. It used to be a very small school underneath the direction of Jim Clements, the president now. Enrollment has definitely gone up. I was part of that enrollment boom, though I was in the grad school portion of that, but the campus is booming. They're throwing up buildings everywhere. There's money flowing in for new names on all these buildings. But I don't know how much is flowing to the football program, and I don't know how much money there is floating around for the football program. So it's going to be interesting to see at Clemson. I don't think Dabo's on the move, but
yeah, I mean, and if he is, if it's because DeBoer leaves and Kiffin is taking a job elsewhere. And then obviously, early Saturday reports came out. There's somebody climbing up Kraft's list that nobody knows about. And that's the whole thing too. Everything that we're talking about is really pure speculation. The only people that know what's going on is Pat Kraft and those that are involved. And that's the crazy thing too, And this weekend is going to give us a lot more clarity as far as how things are going. This is a big weekend for Penn State and Rutgers. to go back to that, and we'll talk about that later this week when Kevin and I record our pregame podcast. But it's going to be a situation where Saturday after the Iron Bowl, or not the Iron Bowl, the Egg Bowl, we know a lot more about how this is going to shake up, because once Kiffin comes calling, then the dominoes can fall, wherever they go, and frankly, it just starts to shut some things up. Will he stay? Will he go? Where does he go? If he goes, who knows? And I think there's significant value in getting on board and watching where this goes. And it's crazy because Ole Miss is having a generational run right now. They're playing some really good college football, and they got a rivalry game at noon Friday. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be exciting. I'm almost ready for it to be over. Like, as much fun as it is, as much content as
it is truly exhausting, because you're texting people every day. Hey, what have you heard? What's the news? What's next? And it's just the same stuff. And that's the coaching search. This isn't 2014 when it's like, wow, flight tracker. There's this guy coming from Nashville, Tennessee, and it's, lo and behold, it's James Franklin, and here we are 12 years later. But it's been an exhausting ride and an already exhausting season. But we're going to talk a little bit more about life around college football when we come back for the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast after this quick break. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Kevin, go ahead. I know this has been bugging you.
Not been bugging me. We'll get to that in a second. We picked Nebraska, Penn State. Obviously, we both picked Penn State for that one, so we're good there. Mizzou, Oklahoma. Mizzou traveled to Norman. Oklahoma's offense did not look good at all. Their defense came to play. Luckily, Oklahoma, I think, had like -7 yards of offense when they threw some 85-yard touchdown or whatever it was. Just lopsided affair there by offensive performance. And then somehow they get it done. Oregon got it done against USC. It got close there for a second. Oregon was up big. USC comes back, and then Oregon finishes it out. Good for them. Pitt, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech just laid an egg. Georgia Tech tried to come back. I think Pitt was up 21-0, if I'm not mistaken. Georgia Tech got it back within 7 with about 2.5 minutes to go. And that was all she wrote. Pitt ultimately won. Credit to Pat Narduzzi, I guess. Notre Dame wasn't a must-win, and this Georgia Tech one was, and they definitely did not win against Notre Dame, and they went out and won this one. The game of the week, though, I'm going to say that I looked that score up at the end of the second segment. I'm not going to lie. That's why I was looking over here on this monitor to my right. My Utah State Aggies went into Fresno State and got the upset. You picked Fresno State, so I clawed back one game. Now I'm only down 5. Here we go. Good news for me. Elsewhere, we just need to talk about it. It needs a mentioning. Notre Dame scored 35 points in the first quarter yesterday. They scored 21 points without having an offensive snap.
Yeah,
Pick six, punt return for 6, pick 6. What a start to the game. Syracuse, I don't know what the hell's going on over there. But yeah, 35 points in the first quarter, something unheard of. Like, that's a bunch of points. Obviously, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, it's now like 61 games since the Steelers have scored more than 7 points in the first quarter. So somewhere between 7 and 35, I would even sign up for. But while the SEC was on a bye week, Notre Dame somehow got a bye against Syracuse and ended up winning that game 70-7. A 70 burger on an legitimate ACC team. I mean, Syracuse is 3-8 now, and they've lost their last 7.
And a lot of that is because they lost their starting quarterback. Let's be real.
They did. Heavy on the transfer portal. They lost their star wide receiver to Penn State. Yeah. But I've not seen 70-7 out of them.
No, that is insanity. And that
was a 36.5 point game. So Notre Dame.
I think Notre Dame is a sleeping giant, and I hate to give compliments to Notre Dame because I don't like Notre Dame. But I like Marcus Freeman and what he's doing there. But they hear all this talk, like this disrespect about not being in the conference and all this stuff. They hear it, and they hung 70 on a Power 5 or Power 4 opponent, and 70 with ease. Like, I mean, Notre Dame is good. They made it to the national championship game last year. Like, they are good regardless of being an independent. Like, why, if you're Notre Dame, why the hell would you join a conference? Let's be real. Like,
their margin of victory yesterday of 63 points was more than Alabama's, whose was 56-0 against Eastern Illinois.
Well, there's that.
I'm just saying, like, that was a legitimate win yesterday, and it just obviously it was legitimate, but that was just an absolute ass kicking. Try to see any other. The problem is the SEC was off. Not a lot of things going on in the Big Ten. Illinois went up to Madison and got their butts handed to them 27-10.
And they rushed the field after that.
I think that deserves an honorable mention there. The 21 ranked Illini. It especially feels good to me because an Illinois fan came back at me on Twitter, or I kind of went after him, and then he came back, clapped back at me, saying that Penn State, if you're familiar with the Kelly Ford rankings on Twitter, it's just a guy who basically just runs a bunch of computer analytics, a bunch of computer calculations and whatnot, saying, as of today, if the teams were to play tomorrow, this is how I feel the teams would shape out. 1 would be 2, 2 would be 3, blah, 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 blah. Penn State is up to 15 in that ranking. I do believe Penn State is, I don't know anybody below, let's say, rank 8. I mean, Alabama's down there. I don't think Oklahoma wants to play Penn State right now. Maybe Alabama. I don't know. Notre Dame, where are they ranked at right now? Are they 10? Are they 10?
I'm not sure at this point. I don't know.
Sorry, let's get that. Oklahoma is number 8. Notre Dame. I think Penn State would lose Notre Dame right now. Alabama's at number 10. I think that'd be a pretty close one. But you round out 11-25, BYU, Utah, Miami, and then the bottom half of the 25 is Missouri, Houston, Tulane, Arizona State. This was the CFP rankings from last week. Do any of those teams want to square up with Penn State right now? Absolutely not. Like, Penn State could legitimately be a ranked team at this point in time. Obviously, the 6 losses are going to keep them out of that. Like, that's not how the rankings work. But Penn State is a legitimate team right now, and it's especially what they did on Saturday night. And an Illinois fan was trying to tell me that, I should probably sit this one out. And I just responded, what was that score against Indiana? Because Illinois has been ranked all season long. Get their teeth kicked in by Indiana, 56-10, I believe was the final score, 53-10. It was wide margin. And then they go up to Madison, Wisconsin, and lose by 17 to Wisconsin, who coming in tonight was probably the second worst team in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I think Purdue's at the bottom. I think that's fair to say. Michigan State, I mean, they're definitely bottom of the barrel. And you lose by 17 in Wisconsin. Ugh. Tough look for the Illini.
Yeah, it is. And that's why you play the game. That's kind of where everything's at right now. It's been a chaotic year, both on the field and off the field. And, we still have one final week of the regular season left. Will there be more football? You don't know. But there will be more about the coaching search with each coming day. So for Kevin Quigley, this has been Jarrod Prugar. We'll catch you again later this week as we preview Penn State's final regular season game against Rutgers on the Nittany Sports Now Network.